there was one person in this relationship who felt more, she's a client, she felt more seen and heard and understood, most importantly understood by me than by her partner. Part of that is because I'm in a growth paradigm too. The other part is because I listen probably in a different style than her partner was.
When couples struggle to articulate that I don't feel seen, I don't feel heard, I don't feel understood. Number one, I feel like what I've observed is that people feel shame around saying that. They feel shame around saying, hey, babe, I just don't feel like you understand me. Conscious couples, business partners, and singles committed to attracting their dream partner. Welcome to the Conscious Couples podcast, where we share our life, love story, and combined relationship expertise to help you create and consistently cultivate the most magnificent, intimate relationship possible.
Never again will you feel hopeless and alone in your intimate relationship challenges.
Having accumulated thousands of hours coaching conscious couples and individuals all over the world, as well as starting and growing a global business together, Alan and I are here to guide you in all things relationships.
Thank you again for tuning into the one place where it's not about you or me, it's about the we. Conscious couples and individuals from all over the world, welcome back to the one and only Conscious Couples podcast for episode number
59.
Wow, came in hot. For episode number 59, we have a very special episode for you. What is causing all of the fighting? And the reason we're doing this episode is because this is the thing people want. They want to have a drama-free relationship. They want to not fight. They don't want to hurt each other. Sometimes we hurt the people we love the most. And it's so unfortunate. And while there's a lot of reasons for that we talk about, and in some ways, every episode of this podcast is really how to stop fighting, of course, and how to have a more fulfilling relationship. Before we dive into this episode, as always, thank you so much to Next Level Podcast Solutions for producing this show, video, audio, all of the above. My love, sweetheart, the love of my life. What is your intention for today's episode? Because this was, after all, your idea.
What was it now? I don't recall that, but
no pressure.
My intention is for our listeners to help them get 1 degree closer to what is causing the fighting in their relationship. Because even, you know what I find, like, even if you're having challenges in your relationship, I find a lot of people that are trying to not call it what it is. Like, they actually had a fight. They don't want to like go near that, or they're just like everything whenever they communicate becomes a fight. So regardless of where you're at in terms of that spectrum, I hope for you, listener, that through this episode, we can continuously help you unveil why it is that you're fighting and start to get to some of those root challenges that so many people have.
Okay, so we have a couple that we know that we have done some coaching with. And as always, we will always keep it anonymous, but we want to help couples learn from couples.
Yeah.
That's what we're doing here.
Heck yeah.
So they were not feeling understood by each other. They were not feeling seen by each other. They were struggling to communicate. And if you, do you remember the name of the episode that we did, Growth Paradigm versus Relationship Paradigm?
Something along the lines of, are you and your partner just different?
Okay. Are you and your partner just different? By any chance, do you know like what range?
Early 50s, I would say.
Okay, so in the early 50s of the Conscious Couples podcast, we did an episode that was, are you and your partner just different?
Yeah.
And we talked about the two paradigms of growth paradigm versus relationship paradigm. Mm-hmm. Here's the highest level version of this. Relationship paradigm, the person is mostly focused on the relationship, and if the relationship is growing, the person in the relationship will grow. Growth paradigm is mostly focused on growth. Growth is the purpose of the relationship. And then the people who are in the growth paradigm, they want to grow first, and then their relationships are a byproduct of that. Mm-hmm. And so high level here, we coached a couple that were in two different paradigms. And they didn't know it.
Yeah.
And just like we didn't when we were in our 20s as well.
Yeah.
Same deal. And so, as a matter of fact, I didn't even know it in my early 30s either.
Yeah.
So here's the deal. So one of the people has huge goals and dreams in this relationship and has a growth paradigm. They have to grow to achieve their dreams, and they know it, and they're very focused on growth. Mm-hmm. I know this person deeply. Growth is so deeply important to them. Mm-hmm. The other partner also has growth in their life, but is mostly growing as a byproduct of the other person. Mm-hmm. They're growing because they're seeing their partner grow, and they're like, I want to grow too. I want goals and dreams. I want to be more fulfilled. And at one point, this partner actually said, hey, can you be my coach? Very cool. Very, very cool. Emilia and I have done some of that with each other as well.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so they're having trouble being understood, though, because what this person values most is quality time in the relationship. The other person values their work at a very deeply meaningful level, and one of the partners thinks the other person works too much.
Mm-hmm.
And the person who works a lot says, you would understand if you had work that was as deeply meaningful to you as my work is to me. And so they kept on having the same conversation, but they weren't getting through to one another. And really at the root of it, and that's the point of this episode, is they were not feeling seen, heard, or understood. Because while they were trying to understand each other, the person in the relationship paradigm has never really understood what it's like to have a dream that calls them every day.
Mm.
And the person who is growth oriented and does have goals and dreams honestly forgets what it's like not to. She was a collegiate athlete. She's always had self-belief. She doesn't really understand what it's like not to believe in herself. Self-worth is more of her issue. So at a very high level here, the root cause of what's causing all the fighting is that neither partner is feeling seen, heard, or understood. Did you see me? Did you hear me? Did you understand me? Did what I say matter to you? And you wanted to go into the different listening styles and how that might help our listeners feel more seen, feel more heard, feel more understood. But at the end of the day, on some level, that's what's causing the fighting, even if you might not know it.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think just from a high level, I don't want to go too deep in some of the stuff that I wanted to bring into this episode because it is super deep. Just, I want everyone thinking about like when, to Alan's point, like when we enter into a relationship, the ones that have made us feel really good, been really like, if you were to put it on a scale, like the ones that you wanted to stay in, why was it good? Why did you feel loved? Why did you feel cared about? Why did you want to stay in it? And why did you want to grow together with that person in some way, shape, or form? It was likely because they were hearing you, they were seeing you, and you felt understood. That's like so important at the root of every single relationship. And likewise, as if you're a listener and you've listened to many of our other episodes, you'll realize that, oh, why it didn't work out in so many of your past relationships was because of these things. You didn't feel heard, you didn't feel understood, and you really didn't feel seen by your partner. And it's such a fundamental concept. Like in general, we are in relation to other people to really meet those needs. And when that can't be met, what happens is we tend to grow apart. So the relationships that didn't work out in your past, if you're listening to this, now you can understand, we'll start to connect the dots of, oh yeah, this is why, because I didn't feel understood, I didn't feel seen, and I didn't feel supported. I mean, I look back at a lot of my past relationships, and if I were to ask myself, did I feel heard, understood, cared for, loved, all that seen? The answer is no. That's why it didn't work out, right? And you and I coach people to really help them grow together, not apart. And when couples struggle to articulate that I don't feel seen, I don't feel heard, I don't feel understood. Number one, I feel like what I've observed is that people feel shame around saying that. They feel shame around saying, hey, babe, I just don't feel like you understand me. They feel guilty about expressing their need to be understood, that craving, that deep desire to say, can you see me in this? And when there's guilt and or shame or a sense of like, I shouldn't have this desire, that can really tear a relationship apart. I mean, in this example, that couple, I'm sure there was almost like a weight that was probably placed emotionally on either one of them because they were trying so hard in the relationship to see, hear, and understand one another. But it turns out they just really couldn't. They were missing each other again and again. And the compound effect of that really did end up driving them apart. And sometimes that will happen, but not if you get ahead of what type of listener are you? Are you listening to understand, or are you just listening to be understood? And the difference between that, what we find in relationship coaching is that so many people just are so deeply striving to be understood that when you have an engagement with your partner, you're not actually listening to see what they're trying to tell you. So like when you and I, sorry, I just hit the mic. When you and I are in a conversation, I'm actually here to listen to you, not to think about what my next thing that I'm going to say is. And so many relationships don't do that. And so if you have a different paradigm, there's no way you can ever feel understood. So that all the more reason to understand what type of listener you are. And there's 3 at a very, very high level that I'll bring into this episode.
Okay, so 3 different types of listeners. We want our listeners to be identifying what type of listener you are. So how many times can I say listener? Listeners, be listening about what listener type you are.
You are, right. So the listener archetype, I guess, if you will. Because when we don't listen, more often than not, we might fight. We're fighting to be heard. Okay, number 1. Attentive. Are you an attentive listener? So this type of listener pretty much waits to finish, waits to have the other person finish talking before they kind of jump in. So a great example of this is like a therapist. A therapist will kind of just let you talk and completely talk it out before they even
It's the best.
say anything. Yeah, exactly. It is the best. It's like, oh my God, I'm being heard. And they're literally so attentive to what you're saying. They don't try to interrupt. They don't try to interject. They don't try to say anything. They really just kind of let you pour it all out on the table. And to feel like your partner is letting you do that, it really is such an extraordinary experience because of the fact that that's a skill. When people are trying, or in relationships, when you're trying to be heard and you're trying to express yourself, it's so easy to get triggered in those situations, especially if you have different relationship or growth paradigms. Like, that it's so hard not to interject, to defend yourself. The ego gets triggered, etc. So attentive listening is letting your partner really kind of just express themselves without any sort of response. Attentively listening, just like a therapist, not being their therapist, but listening like a therapist.
But if you do the attentive listening for too long, eventually it's like, are you even listening?
Right.
Are you a part of this conversation? Or am I just talking to the wall here? So there's other types. So let's go into the next one.
Next one is responsive. This is non-verbal, like pretty much you're conveying continue.
Yes.
I do this a lot with Alan on the podcast, and you'll recognize if you're a long-time listener, I go, like I like nod.
If you
I'm
go
like,
back to the previous episodes, her and I had a great conversation about this because I actually used to do this with Kevin all the time back in the day where I would be overly affirming. And I noticed that you did that early in our episode. So Emilia, when I'm talking, oh yeah, exactly. You should be like, yeah, yes.
Keep going.
And it sounded like she was eating something yummy.
Well, that is what a responsive listener really does. And that can really make someone feel very much seen. However, it can also
interrupt the listeners,
and it can be distracting. And for whoever's trying to express, they might feel like, can you just shut up? Which is kind of what Alan was hoping.
No,
kidding. No.
Only when I was listening as a listener.
Yeah. So this is like a great example of this is your friends. A lot of the friends will, like, if you're trying to express to them, some of the challenges that you've had maybe in your relationship, they'll be like, yeah, they'll like egg you on and whatever, they're hyping you up. Whereas in your relationship, is that something that you are wanting and not getting? Hence why you're talking to all your friends about maybe your relationship challenges, right? Is your partner hyping you up when you're expressing something to them? Maybe not. And maybe that's what you deeply crave. And maybe that's actually why you feel so misunderstood or
unseen.
Yeah.
I want to share this real quick before we go into the next one, which is if you are out there listening to this and you feel like you have a friend or a family member who sees you at a deeper level than your partner, this is something you're going to want to address. Because ask yourself, is that person listening in a different way than my partner is? Because most likely the partner or the family member or the person, in this case, the example that we gave earlier, there was one person in this relationship who felt more, she's a client, she felt more seen and heard and understood, most importantly understood by me than by her partner. Part of that is because I'm in a growth paradigm too. The other part is because I listen probably in a different style than her partner was. And that doesn't make me any better than her partner. It just means you got to try to figure out what is the listening style that I prefer. Mm-hmm. And you won't ever figure that out if you didn't know these. And by the way, I want to give permission here. I didn't know these until last week when you taught them to me. I had no idea. I had never studied listening styles before.
Yeah.
Hey everyone, we're Mike and Jesse, and we just wanted to give a quick shout out to Alan and Emilia from the Conscious Couples podcast. Mike and I have been listeners of the show for a little while, and we decided we wanted to take it one step further and try out couples coaching. In the beginning, we were a little hesitant because we didn't really know how we would be supported through this journey. But Emilia and Alan quickly blew us away during our free 30-minute call, where they were able to listen to us, hear our needs, hear our goals, and to just drive to 5 and find common ground. And we are so excited to jump in every single month with them to continue on our journey. So thank you guys so much. All the love. If you haven't tuned in, 10 out of 10 recommend.
Well, if you want to, for me, like, I realized that in coaching, I obviously dissect so much. And for so many people, like, this is a common thread when it comes to relationships and fighting and why we're fighting. It's like, we don't realize how we actually want to be heard, how we actually want to be seen, and to try to articulate this, right? It's so important to be able to have that level of self-awareness where you can bring that into your partnership. So I didn't know this isn't something that people don't really know. And these are just the top three.
So, I don't even know what your most important one is, which is a huge egg on my face.
No. So the last one is active. So this is verifying for accuracy before proceeding.
Is this talking while running or? I'm just
so this is actually very much like a coach, in which this scenario, this was probably the approach that you took, which was verifying that you heard this person correctly and in the way in which she or he meant it to be received prior to proceeding. This will happen all the time on my coaching calls, where I'll be like, I just want to make sure that I understood and heard you the way in which you wanted me to receive this. And then I'll say it back to them, and they have an opportunity to kind of clarify, like, oh, no, I didn't mean that, and go deeper and clarify, so that I could really see them. And that helps my clients feel extremely seen, as I know your clients do as well, because this is the active type of listening and giving that back. If you're in a growth parent or a different paradigm than your partner, that's already
this one's a huge one for if you're in a different paradigm. So if I'm understanding you correctly, sweetheart, there's 3 different types of listening. That's a perfect example right there of me saying,
beautiful.
Okay, you used to say this. We were watching a movie. It's Lincoln by Steven Spielberg. If you've not seen Lincoln, it's a magnificent film. There's one scene in particular that Emilia loved that she picked up on, and Abraham Lincoln in the film said, he said something and someone repeated it back in the way he knew he understood it. He really got it.
Yeah.
And he said, how amazing to be comprehended. Thank you. And so as someone who has felt very not understood in her life, for you, that was like, whoa, how amazing to be comprehended.
To be seen.
Yeah, to be seen and heard and understood. And so in this case, it's kind of like, hey, I just want to clarify, did you mean this or did you mean this?
Right.
That way you two can be on the same wavelength in the conversation. But if you're with someone who hates being interrupted, it's very difficult to have the conversational agility. So experiment with these, try to figure out which ones you love and then which ones your partner loves, and then just kind of go from there. We don't want to overwhelm anyone, but at the end of the day, put these on your radar and see what's happening.
What I found also, that I want to kind of bring this golden nugget into this episode, people that are growth paradigm actually really like, what I've observed, really like the third one.
Yeah.
Or they really like the third one. They haven't had a lot of the first one. So growth paradigms, what I found, typically like active listening, really verifying what means in a relationship, because so often they'll feel unheard and unseen in their relationships. A tentative is what they really never get, because usually people are trying to butt in and trying to insert and be with them in the moment, where they just want to be understood. Relationship paradigm individuals, what I found is they actually want number 2, the responsiveness. A lot more.
A lot of affirming.
Yeah.
They want to be affirmed so much. Yeah, it's obnoxious. I'm kidding. And again, I have that as well. So I'm being
we all
playful.
have different parts of these.
Yes.
And
we won't go down this rabbit hole, but we all have different parts, and different parts want different things. And so again, that's more of a coaching conversation. So if anyone wants to dive deeper into this, we have relationship talks calls for that reason.
Yeah.
So book that on our calendar. The link will be in the show notes. And I just stole Emilia's plug.
It's okay. So, do you want me to do your plug?
Oh no! So so the alarm was about to go off. So that means we're done here.
We are.
So a question that I want everyone to ask themselves. I don't like to leave without a contemplative question. How much do you feel seen, heard, and understood in your relationship? If your answer is 3, most likely there's a lot of fighting going on, debating, arguing, right? If your answer is 10, most likely everything seems to be rolling. You got momentum. You're on the same page. Most likely you're somewhere between 0 and 10, obviously. And just assess. That's the first step. Assess where you're at. And maybe you want to do it with a couple different relationships. Okay, who do I feel the most understood with? For me, it is Emilia,
Same.
right? Unbelievable. Next would be Kevin.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, who do I feel the least understood with? Right? Insert family member here.
I remember it's so funny. I came across a photo in my photo album when we did the alignment the alignment dial, when I first shared the truth dial concept with you, which is I think we have an episode on that.
I just did another one on I Know You today, actually, about the truth dial.
It's so important, which is essentially another thing, just how much do you feel as though you can express your whole truth, which is the same thing that we're talking about. But I came across that photo and it was so funny because the notches of who I feel the most deeply understood and supported and seen and valued, etc. It's fascinating because when I assess that to what you're saying, I then was able to kind of navigate how I want to turn up my truth dial with specific people. And to this relationship, to what you just said, the first step is assessing where you're at. Really getting a benchmark is so helpful.
And then maybe dial it up one notch, see how it goes. That quote that we've all seen somewhere on Instagram, or it's an inspiring quote, and I think there's a lot of truth to it. You can only meet your partner at the level that you've met yourself. So if you have a partner who has low self-awareness or low awareness in general, it's going to be very difficult to connect at the deeper layers. It's going to be harder for us to connect with a second grader than it is with each other. That's okay, right? A second grader doesn't know much. Doesn't mean we can't remember what it was like to be in second grade. Doesn't mean we can't connect, but you got to understand these challenges. And so if you're in a growth paradigm, which most likely you are, you would not listen to us if you weren't, let's be honest. So contemplate that.
Good on ya.
We'll do good on ya, love. Yes. And I know you, babe, we're doing something new. Unapologetic I know you plugs on the reg. I do a new sign off every single time. I'm not allowed to do the same sign off now, so I do a new one. Mine today was stay classy, next level nation.
Nice.
Yeah, so very I don't know, maybe we'll do it on Conscious Couples. We'll see.
That's good.
Although I've pretty much screwed up every sign off on this podcast so far, so it is new every time. The we and the me and the I together, Conscious Couples. Okay, so we got to get out of here. Everyone go figure out how seen, how understood, and how heard you feel. We love you all, seriously, so much. Reach out to Emilia or myself. No, seriously, real talk. So Emilia's dying, so I'm going to do 2 plugs today. We also have a Relationship Talks virtual event on April 9th, how to have a drama-free relationship, which again, we're going to dive deeper into how to make sure you and your partner are not fighting. At the end of the day, let's not hurt each other. Go ahead, baby.
I was going to say, this is our 22nd event. So I'm super excited. We're going to be able to take all of the awarenesses that we've been able to accumulate in the last 21 events. Yeah. And we're going to be able to give that to every single community member, listener that comes to those events. They're really amazing. And they're able, we go so much deeper into the things that people really care about. Obviously not as deep as coaching, but just one layer deeper than what we get into in this podcast. And so many people feel seen, heard, and understood finally because you're around people that are struggling with the same thing, and you realize, you're not alone, which is so important. So speaking of not alone, not only is that registration link going to be in the show notes, but the registration link to our calendars is going to be in the show notes as well for you to get one-on-one free live
every Saturday,
every single Saturday. Alan and I make sure we allocate time on our calendar to meet you. Yes, you beautiful listener. So all of us have relationship challenges. Not all of us have a spot where we can feel completely safe to get on the same page with our partner. And what better way to spend your Saturday than with Alan and I, where we can literally just sit down, we can chat through. We actually shout out to one of our listeners and someone who actually had taken up Relationship Talks coaching before. She reached out to us in her time of need, and we were able to jump on the phone on a Saturday and work through some of the challenges that she was working on, and we were able to really help in that regard. So really, really excited.
Shout out to you, listener. You know who you are. Thank you for reaching out. And We are so proud of you.
So proud of you. Yeah, it's really amazing what we've been able to cultivate here, a safe space where you can talk openly about your challenges in your relationship. And you can take all of the awarenesses that Alan and I have, customize them for your challenge, and find a path forward given some of our suggested guidance. So that's been extremely valuable and beneficial for so many people. And we would love for you, the listener, to take advantage of that. So that will be in the show notes. We cannot wait to meet you.
And at the very least, you're going to know that this is not a you problem. This is a problem people deal with. That's the one thing that I've noticed is a lot of people feel so alone. And then when they get off those calls, they're like, oh, okay, so other people deal with the same thing. Yes, of course.
1000%.
Of course. Okay, so as always, it's not about you or me. It's about the we. We'll talk to you next time.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Conscious Couples podcast. We love connecting with the Conscious Couples community, so please make sure you follow us on Instagram. I am at Evolve with Emilia, and Alan is a Lazaros 88.
Also, if you or your partner resonated with this episode, leave us a review at the link in the show notes, and please share this with someone you love and care about.
Until next time, remember, it's not about you or me. It's about
the we.